Hello and welcome. This is Laerun with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today we're going to take a look at Dragonlance. It has just dropped today. It's on D&D Beyond and other platforms also today. I'm going to be checking out the Fantasy Grounds edition. It looks like the conversion was done pretty well. It looks like Doug Davison himself worked on most of this. So I'm going to take a look at what we're getting here with the actual content. Not going to give away too much because I don't like to give away spoilers, but essentially when you get this module, you're getting two different things. You're getting the actual adventure, and that has all the images, NPCs, tables, treasure, encounters, those sort of things. And then when you are a player, you have options to go ahead and create characters based off of some of the D&D changes. So on the 1D&D, there's a few things that are kind of like that are incorporated in this. You also have lunar sorcery for a class specialization. And then there's some sub-races. You have Hill Dwarf, you have the Kaganesti, Wood Elves, Mountain Dwarves, Fallen Esti High Elf, Sea Elf, and Sylvan Esti High Elf. So there are some variations there. And then, of course, you have a race of Kender, which is a whole separate race, it looks like. And then you have some backgrounds that are kind of themed for this adventure. So you have the Mage of High Sorcery and Knights of Solamnia. So there are some things that you get as a player. So there are some customization there so you can kind of fit into the setting. I also have some things loaded here were built by the community. I don't know if you've met Vodkard, but he was kind of on this for a couple years, at least 2 or 3 years now, where he's adapted all the classic stuff over into Fantasy Grounds for 5th edition. Now, his content may be a little different than what's given in the books. However, you could probably easily adapt this and run the classic adventures in this particular setting, and you'll already have some material to add to it, so that'd be kind of cool. So that's on the DM's Guild. I'll put that up in the description later after the video. And then also, not only do I have that, but Matakire, one of the Fantasy Grounds Academy community members that has gone on to work with Team 2E and the conversions and doing his own extensions. He created an extension for me, which essentially takes the lunar calendar and converts it over to the Dragonlance calendar. So what I have here are the days of the week, and the months are essentially pretty parallel to our own calendar, except for it renames these for us. Also, I have an extension with the moon tracker, and I've put in the 3 moons, so Nuitari, Solinari, and Lunitari, and these are based off of the moons that are in Kryn. And since the moons have a little influence on magic in this world, I kind of wanted a way to track that. So if I was going to run a campaign, I'll be able to do that. So this moon tracker is something you can get on the Fantasy Grounds Forge. Unfortunately, the actual calendar and the extension that goes along with it is separate, and it's also kind of something that Matakire threw together with me. So if you want to get that, reach out to me or Matakire, and I'm sure we could dig it up for you. But essentially, I added that in so we have a way to track the moons and also to set up, what type of phasing and the shifts that they have and how many days in the month. So it looks like Nuitari, the black moon, has 8 days, and Lunitari, the white moon, has 36 days. So it's a little bit longer than a standard moon. And Solinari, the red moon, is probably roughly closer to our actual moon at 28 days. So this is kind of a cool way to do this. So what happens is when you want to track this, so if you switch to a certain date in the calendar, it also switches the moon, so you have an idea of where they're at in the phase of things, and you can maybe tie that into your magic if you're going to be using a spellcaster from the high sorcery. So I want to take a look at the magic system and see how we could tie this in. So I took some notes here. It does talk about how the high sorcery orders are drawing their power from one of these moons. The Wizards of the White Moon are dedicated to the lunar god. The Wizards of the Black Moon, they have a conclave. They devote themselves to the dark god Nuitari, and the Wizards of the Red Moon work towards the unbiased dictates of the god Lunitari. So there's some Solinari, Lunitari, and Nuitari. Now the locations of the moon, you could roll a 1d8 for each moon, and then you place it in an indicated orbital tracker that used to be included in some of the older content. But this is just an additional rule from an older rule set that would maybe facilitate how you want to handle the magic system. So I want to take a look at the different magic that they have in the actual game itself. So I'm going to open up the modules. And then in modules, if you have the content, if you've already purchased it, download it. And the link's in the content, by the way, if you're interested in picking this up. So the Dragonlance players would more than likely have this content. So if I open up the reference manual, which is the actual character, the book part of it, you have these character creation options. And then you have things that deal with the actual races. And then there's some backgrounds that talk about what the stuff means for the new backgrounds. And then the Mage of High Sorcery is the one I'm going to be looking at, because this is probably the most challenging one that you're going to come across when it comes to building characters. It's a little bit different. It's like a sorcerer, but it has, some differences. So it looks like for the Mage of High Sorcery, you're going to get Arcana and History, and then you get 2 languages of your choice. Looks like you get a little bit of writing utensils and a little gold. And you have a feat here called Initiate of High Sorcery. And in this, you have to be some sort of spellcaster, like a full caster pretty much, in most cases. So it looks like you could be a wizard, mage, sorcerer, any of those. And you're going to get training that's affiliated with the Tower of High Sorcery. So then you're going to choose one of the moons that's going to affect and change kind of how you play a little bit, more like flavor. And there's a specified table. So you can choose 2 cantrips from this table here. And it says you can cast each of the chosen first level spells without a spell slot, so it's a free spell. And you must finish a long rest before you can cast them again in this way. So this is a kind of a limited freebie as far as these spells, and they come in for the different moon types. And then it says your spellcasting feature is either based on intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. So you have to choose this when you select the feat. So that's part of some of the new changes that's coming up with the 1D&D. But it is not a big deal. You can always add or change that as you're building a character. You can kind of build around that. Okay, so that's kind of what you're getting there. And it looks like your talent comes to the attention of the High Sorcerers. It's like an organization of spellcasters that studies magic and also tries to prevent misuse. You get to train amongst them, but whether or not you face the dangers will be kind of decided as you go on in your training. But you'll have to take a test, and it's required to become a full member. And if you remember right, Raceland went through this, and it almost killed him, but he made it through. But it cost him his health and such. So he kind of, he suffered quite a bit. So it's not for everybody. He just kind of barely made it. So if you're building a Mage of High Sorcery character, they're typically sorcerers, warlocks, or wizards, and might have any subclass. Spellcasters who gain their magic through devotion are less likely to be welcomed among traditional mages. Nevertheless, the mages of high sorcery are shrewd, and they rarely let unique opportunities or individuals pass them by. So even members of martial class who train in magic might find a rare place among the group's 3 orders. So you can have like a split class. There's some trinkets that you get if you're going to be one of this type of characters, something you carry around with you just for role-playing opportunities. There's a table that you can roll on. And then it breaks down like what you're going to get for each one of these robes. I'm not going to go through all this, but essentially it kicks in at 4th level, and you get an adept feat for that level. And then it tells you what your influence of magic is going to be like, and the prerequisites, and the sort of theme that you're going to be using. And then there's the Divinely Favored. You have the Initiate of High Sorcery, and then there's the Knight of the Crown, Knight of the Rose, Knight of the Sword, Squire of Solamnia. So these are different types of flavored subclasses, and then the lunar sorcery has the embodiment of the celestial bodies, and then you get your sorcery level, and it shows you all these different things. You get some boons. There's this moonfire if you become a lunar sorcerer, and then you have this other feats that come up as you level up. So that's pretty cool. So that'll be an interesting build if you're going to build a warrior. Excuse me, not a warrior, but a actual wizard or sorcerer. So that's just some of the things you're getting. So you're getting some racial things. You're also getting some monsters. So if you actually go to the NPCs, I'm going to go ahead and close the calendar for now. So if we come over here to NPCs and filter this out to just the Dragonlance content for Shadow of the Dragon Queen, you're getting quite a few NPCs. You're getting a lot of the Draconians. I think you're getting a couple actual, like there's Viewmaster Toad. So if you remember him, he was one of the adversaries, so he's in here. You also get some of the iconic bad guys. I think you're going to get, let's see, here's an adult black dragon. Let me see what else we got here. We got any actual classic adventurers here, or just the bad guys? So it looks like they've went ahead and they just added their own people without actually repeating a lot of the content. So a lot of the bad guys are still here. Let me see if Verminard is still here, because I know he's available in the actual playtest material or the actual pre-release. So yeah, I don't know if he's in here or not. Let me check this out. So he's going to be like the a Dragon High Lord. Let me do a search for Verm. Nope. So if you subscribe to the D&D Beyond, they released a little monster compendium. I didn't know if it was in addition or if it was just a preview of what we're getting now, but there are some different creatures in there, it looks like. And they actually gave you Verminard, his stat block, and they gave you some of the other strange creatures and such. So there's some probably like 7 additional monsters. So I might add those in just to have them. So if I use Fantasy Grounds and you get kind of used to bringing things into Fantasy Grounds, the way that that's done isn't too bad now. It's a little bit of work. It's a little confusing at times, but you can actually do that. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go into, just show you one of these. So I'm going to make my own group. And what I'm going to call it is, by clicking on this green plus button, I'm going to go to Edit Groups. And then right now it's called Group 1. So I'm going to call this Dragonlance Custom, or maybe D&D Beyond, just so I know where these came from. So this is the Monster Compendium 2 that was actually put out last night for people that wanted to claim it. You had to go to the website. And then it was kind of like a way probably to get people to go there. But still, I went ahead and checked it out last night. And I made my own little group. And now I'm going to pull up this import text, which is the dialog box that you'll use when you import text. So it kind of has a string, and then it looks at the text, it translates it, and it makes it a lot easier to enter the NPC instead of having it hand type everything in. This kind of imports it. It's not always 100%, but it works pretty good. So I'm going to go to D&D Beyond. I don't have a way to show you that right now, the actual preview. But while I'm doing that, I just wanted to thank all of you for joining. This is Fantasy Grounds Academy. Our main claim to fame is we just trying to help you get used to the platform, inspire you, provide you with content, and get you playing. That's really what we're trying to do. It's not really for glory and such. It's more or less for just to get people going, and we want you to play it. That's really what the bottom line is. But I'm going to go ahead and go to my sources and D&D Beyond. It's called the Monsters Compendium Volume 2, and it was kind of like a special thing, but they have a version of Verminard in here. And I'm just wondering what the deal is. It said a little note on here, if I remember right. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and bring him in to this. So it says Draconic Devotion. It says Verminard's stat block references the Draconic Devotion monster trait, though this trait does not appear in any of the creatures in this compendium. You'll find several monsters with the Draconic Devotion trait terrorizing the lands of Krynn in the book of the Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. So he has that trait, but they didn't list it. So I'm going to go ahead and add some of the text that comes from the D&D Beyond. So all I'm going to be doing is, first I'm going to copy the source. So I want to make sure that I know where I got this. So if you take a link and you copy and paste it into Fantasy Grounds, and then we're going to hit enter, and then what will happen is it'll generate a link, and then I can actually drag and drop that later into my notes here so that I have a direct link to the source. So I want to go ahead and see if I can grab that. So there's a little link thing that you can link to. If you right click on it, you can copy the link address. I'm not able to show this, but I'm doing this on the page where the entry for Verminard is. And then I'm just going to hit Control V in Fantasy Grounds. And what should give me a link here in the chat window. Yeah, so that's how you generate a link. And when I'm done formatting the NPC, I'm going to put that link in there too, so to make it so that if you need to look at it or go online and see that, then that would be something that you could do. Hey, how's it going, Quint? Hey. All right, so just taking a look at the Dragonlance content. Also mentioned earlier about the extension that a custom extension I have for the calendar, so you can keep track of the moon phases and such. And now we're entering a NPC that comes from D&D Beyond that was in the Monsters Compendium 2. And I'm going to enter Verminard because he's not included in the, it was made for D&D Beyond, but he's not in the actual NPC catalog. So I'm going to import him in. So what I'm doing now is I'm on the D&D page, the D&D Beyond webpage, and I'm copying and pasting the text that comes from there. So this is all pre-text that's more like story type stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. And you can format this just like you would in the book. So there's that. You'll get double spaces if you're copying from a web page or a PDF. That's very common. So this is just stuff that comes from the actual document on the D&D Beyond website. And all this stuff is preamble. It's more like role-playing stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and italicize this, because that's essentially what that is dialogue. And then there's another piece of it that actually talks about Verminard himself. So I'll go on there, copy and paste that as well. So let's see. Yeah, so this has the Dragon Lord, talks about just who he is and what he does and how he fits into the setting. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that here. So this is just standard text here. And then if I need to put anything else in there, I can always add it later, but that's a pretty good start. And then I'm going to take that link that I generated and drag and drop that into this window. So it's ready to go. So when I'm done with this, it'll paste in. And now I'm going to paste the stat block. So the stat block is the most important piece of this. And it's kind of what, the nuts and bolts of this feature to import NPCs. Now, Smiteworks has made a special adjustment or like a filter to bring in content from D&D Beyond. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. So what I'm going to be doing in the actual page is just copying and pasting the stat block. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste it in the actual window on the left-hand side in Fantasy Grounds. So that'll be over here on the left-hand side. And if you need to see what's going on, you can right-click and hit this little wand, and it will take out unnecessary spaces. It kind of does that automatically, but if you want to see what it's actually doing, you can do that. And then there's some more information about Nightbringer, which is Verminard's magical weapon. So it is separately listed here. It's an item, but I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the item information into the information area, so that way we can see what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, but this should rightfully be turned into an item. But for now, I'm just going to put it on the stat block so I at least have that, and then I can build from that later. That way I don't have to keep going back and forth. So I'm going to go back into Fantasy Grounds, come back down here to this information, and just kind of give it a little bit of formatting, not too much. So here's the some of the content that you get. Let's see. I want to go to backspace. Oops. There we go. Yeah, so some of this stuff is, things that you might need to add in yourself, which will come up in gameplay. So whether you're doing homebrew or you're doing, your own thing, or you're converting a module, or maybe it's something that you're just doing for commercial use or whatever. I mean, you're going to have to do a little bit of this sooner or later. So let's see. So this is the weapon. This is a description of how he, him wielding the actual weapon. So here on the left is a stat block. Over here on the right is the story information. So once I'm done entering that, this took a little longer because he's a high-level NPC, and there's a lot of information here. So I'm going to go ahead and click import. And once I do that, it's going to carry over the stat block information. And don't close this until you're happy, because you might have to go back and make some edits. So I'm just going to expand this thing out here. Looks like it pulled it in pretty well. It did a pretty good. There's the legendary actions. Here's the spellcasting trait. And there are some notes here. And then if I go to the other tab, oh yeah, that looks really good. And then if I had the artwork for Verminard, I could link it into this area as well. I do not have the artwork prepared, but there is a graphic that you could pull in, so I might do that later. But I'm going to go ahead and lock this, and that basically is how you pull in NPCs, is if you have a stat block that's formatted correctly. The key is the text has to be formatted. If it's kind of a goofy formatting, or it's in a weird different order, or if there's missing one letter or a period or something, it's not going to work right. So that's something you got to watch for when you're importing text. But essentially that imported Verminard, and then I have the notes for his weapon here on the back. So once I figure out how to bring that in as that weapon, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So this is pretty cool. You get all this stuff, and then you have, here's the mace up here, Nightbringer. Yeah, that looks really good. I like how it translates this down here. This is a new thing in Fantasy Grounds. It's a lot nicer when you build NPCs. So here's that link I was telling you. It goes right to the entry in the D&D Beyond website. And then the only way now that you can check the spells is you have to add the NPC to the combat tracker. So it's not like the before. When you used to do spells, you used to close the NPC sheet and then reopen it, and that triggered Fantasy Grounds to parse through and create the spell list. Now what we have to do is take this and drag it over to the combat tracker to check the spell. So I'm going to left click and drag, and that brings Verminard over here to the combat tracker, and then I'm going to check out his offense, and it looks like it worked right. So you see this list here of all these different things. These are traits and features and spells that he has at his disposal. This is what it should look like. So that's how you check it. Before, you used to just close the NPC and then reopen it, and it used to parse on the sheet itself, but now it parses in the combat tracker. So that's a change from not very long ago. About 3 or 4 months ago, they changed that. It was around in the summertime. So nonetheless, that's how you'd bring in something. So you can add your own content. And the reason I did that was so that you can see that you can add your own stuff if need be. You're not going to be able to cover everything you want or need in the setting. They did a pretty good job, it looks like, in trying to recreate some of the nostalgia, but there's a new storyline because this actually takes place a little bit before the traditional classic modules. So the storyline is at the beginning of the invasion of the dragon armies, not in the middle or at the end. So this is kind of a little different twist on the setting. So it's kind of like a prequel. And then, of course, you have your Dragonlance stuff. You have these Dragonlance player stuff. So let's take a look a little bit of the artwork. So here's one of the really nice photos that I like in the actual content. So it looks pretty good. Artwork's pretty decent. It looks like a red dragon here. I don't know if it's been defeated or what's going on, but it looks like they may have taken it out, but or at least put it to sleep. And then here's Takisi's, the Dragon Queen, in her human form. So that's pretty cool. So I've kind of done my own artwork with this stuff, but she pretty much has this kind of look with all these horns, this kind of jagged, ornate armor. And then you have, let's see, what else do we have? So then there's the symbols of all the different gods in here. And here's the town of Gateway, which is one of the first places that I believe fell under the, in Ansalon or Avid City or whatever, where the main city is. So that's pretty cool. So let's take a look at a map. I want to really look at what the maps look like. I haven't really taken a good look at these yet. So here are the maps. So let's take a look at the Bastion of Takisi's map. So this must be like a fortress. Oh yeah. And it has your typical Sword Coast, kind of Wizards of the Coast, D&D kind of format. So it looks pretty par for the course. I'm pretty sure people will redo these. These look rather kind of basic. They do work for Virtual Tabletop, but they weren't designed for it. As you can see, it's kind of goofy looking, but let's unlock this and see if we can see lighting or anything like that. So all the line of sight looks like it's been put in. So the occluders are in here with the doors and such. And then the centerpiece is kind of this purplish thing. I think you can actually add your own lighting to that if you wanted to. So if you wanted this to be like a pulsating maelstrom or some kind of crazy thing, you can actually add this kind of purple light. So what I'm saying is, like, if you want this to glow and kind of give off more of an actual glow, you can go to the lighting tool, and we're gonna add a light, and the behavior is going to be, I think, a pulse, just to kind of make it interesting. And I'm going to change the color to this purple. So if you want to use the color that's already present, you can use the eyedropper here and just kind of hover over some of that purple content in here and hit OK. And then I'm going to click in the center, and then that's going to set up that light. So let's see what that looks like with some kind of NPC on here. So I'll put Verminard in here. So he probably would be in here. So I'm going to go back to play mode, and I'm going to turn on some of this. Yeah, see, here's the actual, that looks really cool. So let me put Verminard on here, and let's see what he looks like. So I got Verminard here. So yeah, so this is what it looks like with a NPC on here. So that's really cool. So you can come up the ladder and talk to Takisi's here, probably groveling for forgiveness. So that's kind of cool. So you got the maps and such. You can add your own lighting, or you can just use what they give you. It's up to you. You can even add more assets. You can recolor this if you don't like the coloring. All kinds of cool stuff you can do. But that's not too bad. At least the maps are not black and white style like they've done traditionally. I don't mind those occasionally, but they started to do it in every book, and it got kind of old. So anyways, this is just kind of what a preliminary look. So I was just kind of looking through, checking out all the different things that are provided. I don't want to give away too much, because when you're discovering this, I kind of want you to be able to kind of look through it yourself, but just kind of give you some ideas of some things that you could do with the actual setting. So I think I'm going to call it. Again, I'll put the links in the description for the content. This is going to be a fun thing. I think I'm going to run kind of a one-shot through one of the very beginning parts of it, because it seems like there's some preludes that you can run that can kind of be like a one-shot, I guess. It seems a little sandboxy in regards to how it plays out until you get further into the module. But it does have some pretty cool features that I'm interested in exploring, especially the magic. It looks like it's going to be a little bit different and fun, so that'll be great. And I think that'll be it. So hopefully you guys have a good week. Happy holidays, and take care. And hopefully you guys have some fun.